Greetings and welcome. You're tuned into TMH's Daily English News. Our headlines today include the Ethiopian Army Chief in Turkey to take part in the Turkish military exercise. FAO calls for the urgent fertilizer funding before planting season begins in the northern region of Ethiopia. Dollar squeeze and accelerating inflation pummel the Ethiopian currency. FAO has called for urgent funding to purchase essential fertilizer before planting season begins to conflict-affected northern region of Ethiopia. The urgent call came as the imminent long rains are expected to start in the coming month. FAO said in a statement released on Tuesday that with the rainfall outlook favorable, normal to above normal, the season offers a critical and cost-effective opportunity to improve food availability across the region. However, limited access to agricultural input, particularly fertilizer but also seeds, is a major threat to the season. FAO also said the Ethiopian government has offered humanitarian agencies access to fertilizer at a cost of $1,350 US per ton through a government facility to support vulnerable households within the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia. As of the 16th of May, agriculture cluster partners have sufficient funds to avail only 5,800 tons of fertilizer, which is just 10% under what is needed. It called for the urgent funding from resource partners to enable cluster partners to immediately secure 60,000 tons of fertilizer from the government facility and ensure farmers have it in hand before the start of the planting season. According to FAO, farmers in Ethiopia's Tigray region in 2021 produced 900,000 tons of staple foods, 40% of normal production, which was equivalent to 7 to 8 months of annual cereal needs. That both improve seeds and fertilizers at least similar levels to 2021. Farmers will likely see a considerable drop in production compared with the previous year. This will further increase levels of acute food insecurity, as FAO warned, adding that if farmers receive the inputs that they need, they will be able to harvest and begin consuming the produce by October 2022. Africa has said to be not getting the due attention despite the fact that the world's 10 most neglected displacement crises are currently in Africa. Every year, the Norwegian Refugee Council analyzes crises that have caused more than 200,000 people to be displaced from their homes, then publishes a list of the world's 10 most neglected displacement crises. This year, for the first time, all 10 of the most neglected crises were in the African continent. As they write, most international media outlets rarely cover these countries beyond an ad hoc reporting on new outbreaks of violence or disease. Many African countries, they add, are deemed to be of limited geopolitical interest. The Cosmopolitan Globalist said, if newspaper column inches were assigned in proportion to the human suffering, Ethiopia would be all you ever read about. But the Cosmopolitan Globalist reported that the conflicts received little news coverage at all. Credible research puts the Tigray conflict's death toll from violence and famine at 500,000, a number that eclipsed the death toll from the war in Ukraine by many multiples. The Internal Displacement Monitoring Center reported recently that the conflict and violence displaced more than 5.1 million people within Ethiopia within the year of 2021 alone, triple the number reported in 2020 and the highest figure ever recorded for any country in any given year. The previous record for displacement was 3.5 million in Syria in 2013. According to the Cosmopolitan Globalist, one would be forced to concede on reflection that the fate of the over 1.4 billion people with median age of 19 years is of considerable geopolitical significance. A delegation led by Ethiopia's chief of staff arrived in Turkey yesterday to take part in military exercise organized by the Turkish government. During his visit, Field Marshal Brahanu met with the counterpart General Yasir Guler, chief of the General Staff of Turkish Armed Forces, to discuss bilateral issues, according to ENDF. Citing the Ethiopian embassy in Turkey, ENDF said that an agreement has also been reached between the two countries to work together in capacity building and cooperation in military support. EFES 2022 military exercise is one of the biggest military exercises by Turkish armed forces. It is said to be remembered that the House of People's Representative approved a draft bill on military cooperation agreement with the Republic of Turkey, including agreements on joint military exercises and anti-piracy collaboration. Ethiopia said the goals of the agreements were, among others, to create a framework for cooperation in education and training, joint military exercises, defense industry construction, cyber attack prevention, peacekeeping, military financial cooperation, and anti-piracy campaigns. as encouraging steps are taken to resolve the military conflict, pressure for a negotiated settlement is needed. According to This is Africa, truce in Ethiopia seems to have opened the door to African mediators after almost 2 years of conflict between the federal government and the Tigrayan forces. On the 24th of March, the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali declared a humanitarian truce to facilitate a free flow of emergency humanitarian aid into the Tigray region. The government of Tigray reciprocated this notion the next day. Since then, both the government and Tigray forces have observed the humanitarian truce and the cessation of hostilities, despite a recent uptick in the war rhetoric from both. Tigrayan forces have complained that there are still few aid trucks entering Tigray through the humanitarian corridor at the Afar-Tigray border. These forces have withdrawn from much of the area they controlled in the Amhara and Afar regions, two regions in the conflict of the government seems to have brought into the fold, and is encouraging step to brokering peace and signals mutual recognition by the government and the Tigray forces of a stalemate. This is Africa indicated, however, that the current situation is likely a temporary de-escalation, and is said given the intricability of the conflict's root causes and the attendant social trauma. Former UN Humanitarian Affairs Chief says Ethiopian government blocked Tigray famine declaration. Mark Lowcock said the international system for declaring famine is broken. Timnitz Bairu presents the story.
The Ethiopian government blockaded a declaration of famine in its Tigray region, according to Mark Lowcock, the former United Nations Under-Secretary General for Human Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. At the end of my time in the UN, it was clear to me that there was famine in Tigray, and the only reason it wasn't declared was because the Ethiopian authorities were quite effective in slowing down the whole declaration system, Lowcock said during an online event held by the Overseas Development Institute on Tuesday. Lowcock left his role at the UN last year. Before he left office in June 2021, Lowcock said that there is famine now in the war-torn region, and even though the UN put out a statement that didn't go as saying people were on the brink and at risk of a looming famine. Absent a declaration, the aid sector has used phrasing such as famine-like conditions. Amid the conflict, the government imposed a long-standing blockade of aid into Tigray, which has only recently started to improve. However, the region remains cut off from some services. In 2021, an estimated 401,000 people reportedly faced catastrophic conditions. The designation for famine under the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, an initiative bringing together aid groups, humanitarian agencies, and government. A recent UN report said this risk might remain relevant unless humanitarian access stabilizes. According to UN estimates, nearly 500,000 children are malnourished in Tigray this year, 100,000 of whom are severely malnourished. The Ethiopian government is no stranger to deterring these kinds of declarations. It has a history of denying that the country was experiencing cholera outbreak. Lowcock said the international system for declaring famine is broken. While it's possible to publish underlying data on what constitutes a famine, such as malnourishment figures, getting a declaration is political. You have to fight your way through the IPC's Famine Review Committee, and you can be blocked by the authorities of the country that you're engaging with. And that's what happened in Tigray, he said. Lowcock added that the current system is not functional.